I'll start off by just welcoming everyone back to CGA and thanking you again for your continued support and engagement in this discussion that we've had over the last, really over the last week. A lot of work has been done. Being part of the Common Ground Alliance is, I think, an important effort for the region, and we really appreciate your commitment and dedication to this. We want to just have you take a moment to really recognize and reflect on all the good work that's happening in our region right now.
Yeah, Zoe, it's really amazing when you look around. I think, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but so many of us are busier than ever. There's so much hope and positivity happening here. And I just want to, I want to reflect on the power of this group. The power of CGA is in our deep connections to the Adirondacks and what we decide to do together. So more than 200 of our neighbors participated in this year's forum, focused on attracting a new generation of residents. This was new for us. This was news for CGA, this singular focus. And we feel like it's already producing several key steps necessary to ensure growing and vital Adirondack communities. And we truly believe that there are several areas where intellectual and financial capital can be deployed to make a dramatic impact.
Initial feedback from the survey that we sent out last week was very positive. In fact, many people thought that it was easier to participate virtually, which I think was really interesting and good to hear. So our task today is really to share some of those key points that we heard throughout the forum last week and to outline steps to ensure that the work that we move forward with and capture those ideas and really bring things to the next level. And as we talked about last week when we signed off, the information discussed last week will really serve as a platform for the blueprint for the Blueline, which is the document that CGA creates every year as a result of the forum. And then again, this year, we're so happy to be working with the Northern Forest Center as they build a strategy on how to attract a new generation of Adirondack residents.
Yeah, it's great. So before we get started, I want to take a moment to express a special thanks to Doug Haney of Great Range for all of his support with the 2020 forum. He's kind of the behind the scene master here, so he deserves huge credit. And of course, to all of our sponsors who are up on the screen now, we could not have done this without you, so thank you so much. And I want to specifically recognize Nikki Hilton Patterson of the Adirondack Diversity Initiative for engaging in a very important discussion with us. Common Ground Alliance will continue to do what we do best, or what we hope we do best, which is try to diffuse any debate to attain action. CGA will actively work with Nikki and the ADI team, including Anka, to continue focusing on cultural consciousness and creating welcoming communities.
Yeah, that's great. Our sponsor list is really overwhelming. We've had a lot of great support from folks, so thank you again. We do have a short poll that we want to ask you to participate in. Can't have a webinar without a poll. I love polls. So I will bring this up. So the question is, what was the most valuable part of CGA to you? And so I think you can see that now. Your answers, choose one. Maybe you want to choose all of them, but I guess you can only choose one. We have 100 people on the line right now, which is fantastic.
Boy, I don't know if luckily as a panelist, I'm not allowed to pick, but I would have a hard time answering this question, so.
I know. Exactly. I think it's all so important, and having that regional perspective and the opportunity to talk to folks and hear about issues is they're really important. So I think almost everyone participated. So you can see here that, wow, over half of you really appreciated the opportunity to learn about and solve important issues in the Adirondacks, which is a main goal for CGA. So this is great. This reinforces the work that we do. And thank you again so much for your commitment and your dedication to this work. So Kelly, I'm going to hand it over to you to start our program and move on to our next part of the forum today.
Thanks, Zoe. So it's exciting to have an opportunity to do more this year by talking to individuals and having some collective action at multiple scales, both at the local level and the regional level. And today we'll also hear from Albany, which is really exciting. So as Zoe mentioned earlier, our partnership with the Northern Forest Center is exciting as they launch into a new strategy based in part on what they heard at the forum. Their results will give communities another pathway to engage on the issues of attracting new residents. And I'd like to introduce and thank Rob Riley, president of the Northern Forest Center, and ask him and members of his team to share some of their reflections and next steps.
Callie, thanks so much. And my colleague, Leslie Carrison, who many of you know, lives in Saranac Lake. I am transmitting from a few states away over New Hampshire, but luckily to the forum and the way it was set up this year, I could participate as fully as the rest of you. So again, I'm Rob Riley. I'm the president of the Northern Forest Center, and really appreciate the invitation by the Common Ground Alliance core team to participate as deeply as we did in this year's session. It was enriching to have many of our team members involved in facilitating different sessions and bringing that information back into this strategy that both Callie and Zoe mentioned. So thank you for that. And I think one of the things we are going to make sure that we do today is not inundate you with all the lists of all the great actionable things that we heard, but really kind of touch on some high level directional opportunities that Leslie and I and our team gleaned from the reams of notes and information that were collected during the conversations that I thought were incredibly rich and really exciting. And at least from the group that I was participating in, we had 100% retention from day one to day two. So there was a real dynamic group there. So thank you for all of you who participated. Leslie?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I'm gonna share a short presentation with slides that we have put together to help tell this story. We wanted to start by grounding this part of the plenary today in sort of where we started with the Common Ground Forum last Tuesday morning in that plenary session, where Zoe and Callie shared a poll around this sort of the main precepts about why we're focused on this theme of attracting new residents. And so we wanted to just recap those poll results to ground this conversation in the fact that this really is a common ground issue. So we asked a question related to the fact that the demographics of the Adirondacks pose a problem for communities, and 84% of those of you that participated in that agreed or strongly agreed or strongly agreed. 98% agreed or strongly agreed with the notion that attracting new residents, and particularly younger ones, is necessary and positive. And 87% agreed or strongly agreed with the idea that we have 10 million visitors to the Adirondacks, and they're a source of potential new residents for us. So I think all of those really just kind of underline the notion that we do have a lot of common ground around the idea that focusing on this issue of attracting new residents is critically important for our region. And then the last poll question that I'll show is this question that we asked about where we asked you to express whether you're open to new ideas and new alliances to attract residents, and 96% voted for their agreement on that topic. So I think there we see a real opportunity and an energy for traditional boundaries with implementing these ideas. So we just wanted to start there and frame this conversation in that context. And Rob, I'll advance to this slide.
Yeah, thanks. In talking about opportunity and looking forward on implementation, one of the things that we were struck by when you did your registration is that you signed up and registered how old you were. And over 1/3 of the participants at CGA were under 45. And I think that many times professional meeting goers can go to these things, but not everyone else are able to. So we really appreciate younger folks here. Some of you know Jacinda from Origin Coffee in Saranac Lake, and Garrett of the Birch Boys in Tupper Lake, two younger entrepreneurs who are really moving not just the idea of being attracted to this place, but really moving commerce and places where younger people can congregate and participate in. So thanks. We appreciate the voices that were brought, and we appreciate those that are really out on a limb doing the hard work in communities of running businesses and being part of the community.
All right. So the next idea we wanted to touch on is really kind of at the heart of this work. What are the assets and the amenities and the sort of core conditions of our communities that young people are looking for? The list that we're showing here, we know is not revolutionary. We know that many of us know this, and we know that many of these ideas are things that we talk about on a regular basis. But we think that it's important to put them up here and to share them because they are so important for us knowing that where we're going with this work and what our goal is here. So I am not going to talk exhaustively about this list. I know that Bill and Willie will probably touch on some of these same ideas in their portion of the presentation, but I just want to reflect on a couple of them quickly. Certainly the notion of a welcoming and safe community is one that we heard in a new lens this year with the context of Nikki Hilton Patterson and Bill Farber's conversation that really urged us to think more inclusively about what it means to have a welcoming and safe community for everyone. We definitely heard that quality housing and quality rental housing and quality workforce housing is a core component that we just can't miss in order to accomplish this work successfully and to attract new residents. And we had some really vibrant conversations around what's working there and what the challenges are. And, again, we're not going to talk exhaustively about that, but it's just a theme that we will be addressing more in the strategy document. And again, I think perhaps something that you may hear more from Bill and Willie about later. And then skipping down on the list, I want to just touch on the notion that jobs and careers are critical. This was something that we heard repeatedly from especially the younger people in our breakout groups, that jobs is not a numbers game. It's about a pathway to a career, and especially those who are earlier in their career path really need to be able to see the arc of what their whole career might look like. And so I think it's encouraging us to think beyond individual jobs and to think more about networks and connectivity to broader career paths for our young people. Rob, I'll hand it back to you.
What I think many of us were impressed by was really the number of different initiatives that were already underway in the different communities and the different geographies that we were engaged with. And I think I was really impressed by participants' willingness to take this new lens look at their community through the eyes of what it would take to attract and retain younger residents. In many cases, I think we checked some assumptions that we had, and assumptions of how do people know about what's going on in the community? What are different barriers to participation? What do we think about when, what are our inherent bias when we look at people from away, whether they look exactly like us or others? And almost to each of those different points, different members of different groups had solutions that were low cost, that were simple, that were implementable within a day. We obviously are talking about issues that are systemic and require complex and comprehensive solutions, but that type of thinking sometimes stymies near-term action. And so what I think was really critical was that we broke down the what and the how. And I think one of the things that came up strongly in a number of different groups was how we move from here to there, because it is about making sure that not just that younger people's voices are able to be spoken, but that they're engaged in their own solutions in the communities. And I'll just cite Ryan and Vanessa Hutton from Chestertown as young people who were in the community, and they weren't worried about what the problems were. They were just kind of figuring out how quickly they could make the solutions happen. And I think in thinking about that frame of what fresh eyes and assumptions are we making, there is an element of those of us who have been making these decisions. We need to open up and remember that we're not that young anymore, and that younger generations and participants are bringing new ideas and new voices and have the capacity to be leaders, not at a subordinate table, but as peers within their communities. And the energy that they bring to the conversation is quite striking. So really the first how, of course, is ensuring pathways for engagement. And in doing so, making sure that we're not making it difficult for younger leaders to participate. In many cases, it was cited that if I were just invited to participate, it would have been easier rather than me looking for those options. They weren't as evident as they were to people who had been here for years and years and years. The other piece that really came up was the notion of building on existing models. The notion of the Plant to Sign initiative in Keene, simple to put out a notion of a welcoming community with very simple language, with something that already existed, that really was something that went to the heart of our racial equity and diversity conversation. We have seen in other places like a group that Leslie actually convenes and facilitates, the Adirondack Community Recreation Alliance, really creating a focused strategy. In this case, it's on community-based recreation, but the flexibility within that strategy to adapt in a time of COVID, to adapt in a time when there might be a recession or is a recession, and breaking that down into actionable steps so that momentum and movement, people can feel like something is happening as opposed to being stymied at a larger level. When we look at momentum and fueling this activity, obviously capital is a big piece of it. And one of the things that I think is really critical is really leveraging, and we heard this from different places, that the state was incredibly helpful, and it was private investment in different ways that really came in to move projects and do it in a way that was very nimble in the marketplace. We heard a bit about, and I'm going to jump back quickly because I thought it was really important, was affinity groups and different ways in which people are engaged. Mountain bike trail riding groups, trail running groups, snowmobile groups. These are ways that we build community and engage people and introduce them to some of these different issues. And many of those people who are participating in that are sometimes those that have the capital available to invest. The other piece that I think is really important that we touch on here is that we have a tendency, we in society look at very, very short-term and impatient outcomes. But when we look at the progress that needs to be made in the work that we're approaching here, is that it is long-term. It is 30 years in the making to have a decline of a community based upon the loss of industrial or industry. It's going to take that long to bring communities back, and to have real results and progress towards that long-term goal is critically important. And then the last thing I'll quickly say is I think what was really interesting to hear about was the use of social media to promote activity that was happening, fun things to do. It was creating a snowball and a different narrative for people out there. And I think that I've seen a few things come out from Roost, from other organizations that really do talk about not just things to do, but really highlight people having a great time doing it and balancing a livelihood at the same time. So there's no one path here. It is very complex, of course, but in all of this, and as we'll include in the overall report, there's a lot of smaller pieces that help to move towards that larger goal of setting the conditions in community that do attract and retain younger people. And I'll just need to reiterate that these are already happening, and I think that they can be taken up a notch, accelerated and amplified through this convening process and through some of those base principles of people being eager and open to new partnerships and ways of moving this larger concept of community, overall community health in the Adirondacks forward.
Thanks, Rob. You know, before I advance the slide, I was struck as you were talking about the mixture of us needing to advance sort of the hard infrastructure projects and also sort of the softer components of our communities. And soft sounds a little bit derogatory, and I don't mean it in that way, but we have sort of a unique blend of things that we need to move forward in order to be successful in that work, and that sometimes feels challenging, but I think it also gives people across the community an opportunity to dig in.
Yeah.
And I just want to reflect. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, what I think that we can't underemphasize enough, which is the principal layer here in Common Ground, is the relationships that really do make this move forward. It isn't about bricks and mortar. It's about the people who put those in place and move different projects. So I think you're absolutely right, Leslie. Thanks for raising that.
One point that I was meant to make earlier is just that I heard multiple times over the course of the breakout work, people cite sort of variations on a theme where they said to us, I came for the wilderness, but I stayed for the community. I came for the farming, but I stayed for the community. I came for the recreation, but I stayed for the community, whatever the sort of blank for that particular individual might have been. And so I think that is sort of a call to all of us to think about what the attributes of our communities and their inclusion are, and how we can strengthen those for everyone. So in closing, we wanted to just basically extend an offer, and it's not one that is necessarily our offer to extend. I mean, I think everyone who participates in CGA realizes that it's incumbent upon all of us to move this work forward. And so we, as Rob just cited, we really encourage those of you that have already started to take the initiative to implement ideas that you heard coming out of the breakout groups. That's just really wonderful, and we hope that more of that will happen. There's also a specific opportunity related to our work at the center around the strategy that we're developing, that if anyone specifically wants to receive a copy of that strategy or be part of a network of people that will talk about how to implement that strategy, we encourage you to essentially sort of raise your hand and say, like, yes, I'd like to be part of that. And the mechanism for you to do that is going to be for you to complete the poll that you will learn about. It's the post CGA poll that you'll get in your email, and I think also in your chat box. So I encourage you to click on the link in the chat box and open a browser window with that. And right after this event today is complete, complete that poll. It's very short. It won't take you very long, and it'll be a tremendous way for us to know who wants to be engaged in this strategy work moving forward. I guess in closing, we just really want to thank everyone so much for all that you brought to the forum this year. The contributions that came through the breakout work, the really engaged conversations that were had there were very impressive, and I think spoke to the commitment that so many people feel to improving the Adirondacks in their community. So thank you, and thank you again to CGA for inviting us to be part of the forum this year. And I think back to you, Zoe and Callie.
Yeah, great. Wow, thank you so much, Rob and Leslie. That was a great presentation and amazing. You boiled all of that down into those great slides, and it's really great work. And thank you for everything you put in. We know it was a lot of work to structure this for CGA and to do it virtually and to manage all of the breakout rooms and everything that goes along with it. So you did a fantastic job, and thank you again for your work on this important topic. We really hope people will continue to work with the Northern Forest Center on this issue. And like Leslie said, you will get an email from us after today's webinar with a SurveyMonkey link that it's literally just seconds. You can open it up and it just asks a series of maybe just a couple questions that allow them to capture your name and email and get back in touch with you. So we really, really encourage it because we think it's great. So thanks again. So now we're going to shift, thanks Rob, thanks Leslie, shift to our next session in the portion of the program, and how the results from the forum can help move us forward on legislative and policy solutions. So we asked two of our core team members, Willie Janeway and Bill Farber, to join us and reflect on the forum and walk us through next steps from the CGA perspective. So hi, Bill, and hi, Willie.
Thanks, Bill and Willie. And I'll just, before you get started, I'll just point out that Doug has put the link to the survey in the chat feature. So if people want to do it sooner than the email, that'd be great too. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you to Zoe and Callie for all your leadership throughout, from planning one type of forum before we were facing the pandemic, to pivoting, to Doug coming in, helping us go virtual, to Northern Forest Center, and so many more. I'll get in trouble, so I'll stop there. But I think, Zoe, the leadership that you and Callie provided for a pivot here, and to avoid canceling with all the crises that everyone was dealing with and continue this is so important. I'm going to take just a couple minutes. A few things have been referenced so far on today's wrap-up session. One has been core team. One thing that has been mentioned is the blueprint. So let me just zoom backwards and then touch briefly on those, and then I will pass the microphone to Bill Farber. It was some 20 years ago when somebody said that it seemed like the stakeholders in the Adirondacks would rather fight than win. And for decision makers in Albany trying to help build a better Adirondack Park, help deal with the challenges that made it very difficult. And a couple of folks got together, my predecessor at the council and a couple of others, and they realized that there were things they actually agreed on and wanted to work together on. Acid rain was threatening the environment and the economy and the fishery. This was back in about year 2000 when this was starting, and the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments had not kicked all the way in. Because of the recession at that time, there was a proposal for the state to stop making payments on state lands, to stop making tax payments to local communities. Those were two issues that had wide agreement. I suspect if we'd done a Zoom poll at that time, we would have been at 110% agreement that those were issues that threatened critical things to the Adirondack Park. So those were founding issues that brought together the Adirondack Park Common Ground Alliance. And over time, there developed what has now been called a core team, a small group of uncompensated volunteers that work behind the scenes to try and keep this dialogue going. And for 2007, if this had been our usual under the tent event or under the pavilion, this would have been our 14th actual forum that we did. But during that time at the beginning, two individuals deserve a special shout out. Jim Herman and Dave Mason, often known just as Jim and Dave. They did work on an 80Ks Future project, and they helped many of us realize, and I suspect many of you, that there's so much more we all agree about in terms of the importance of and the future of the Adirondack Park than the things we disagree on. So that Futures project, that vision, 25-year vision they put together, helped bring people more together and really helped catapult the Adirondack Park Common Ground Alliance up to a new level. We had a much higher turnout in the early forums that occurred. And if we were under the tent, I would ask people to raise hands. How many of you have attended forums in 10 years or for the last 5 years? And I know I would see a lot of hands go up. And we'd ask how many of you are at your first, and we would see some hands come up on that too. And that would always be so good and so important. During the past summer forums, we would break into different groups, breakout groups, and each group would have a particular subject, and they would be tasked, identify something the legislature can do, something the executive, something that could happen in the budget. Think of some of outside the box, moonshot idea. So we were structured very differently. For several reasons, we realized that structure wouldn't work this year, but in the past, as a result of that structure, your core team and a group of us would work together, including Bill Farber and myself, Ross Whaley and others, and take those 3 recommendations from each breakout group and turn them into what we called a blueprint for the Blueline. And we would go down together to Albany, and people would be, wow, there's Bill Farber and Willie Janeway together, an environmentalist, the head of the Board of Supervisors for Hamilton County. They disagree on some things, but here are things that they agree on, things that came out of the larger, all of you participating in the Common Ground Alliance. That had a lot of positive impact. We didn't always agree on all the details. We did not always have success on everything, but collectively we helped put on the must-do list of decision makers at the state a number of key items: the need for more funding for communities, the need for a health and safety land bank, the need to make the Adirondack Park more welcoming and inclusive and address diversity, equity, inclusion issues. For a number of years, we had breakouts talking about road salt, and we just now, last night, have the Senate passing what the Assembly had passed, a road salt task force bill, bipartisan Bill, upstate, downstate representatives working together on that, a lot of organizations. The role that you all played as part of Common Ground Alliance, helping identify that as an issue that people agreed on and should work together on, is an absolutely critical role of what happened. And that went into the blueprint that then went to Albany. This year, we obviously have a different situation. And being virtual, we realized we needed more structure. So we had the larger theme of attracting a new generation of residents. We had breakout groups all focusing on that team. It was harder to force everyone in the time frame and the medium we were using to very specific 2 or 3 items. So there's been a much larger brainstorming and collection of ideas. So in the past, we've had blueprints that went and really told Albany, told the executive and the governor's team, the legislative team, key agencies, here are things you, often you in Albany, can do to help us who live in, who visit, who care about, who love the Adirondack Park. This year, we see a potential transition to a blueprint for the Blueline that is much more inclusive. The discussions were much more inclusive of a much wider variety of issues, and Bill will touch on that. And we could end up with a blueprint this year much more along the lines of, what can we do? What can we and state leaders do together, rather than saying, what can you do for us? We hope that is something that people will embrace and work with us on. And as we pull it together, we look forward to sharing that back out to everybody. Bill, I want to turn it over to you. Thank you for your work on the Adirondack Common Ground Alliance on all projects throughout the park. And if Doug, I believe you're doing the slides, can advance it to the next one, that'll put it up for Bill.
Thank you, Willie, and thank you, Doug, for putting the slide up. You know, Willie pointed out that a number of us have worked for a long time on some of the issues associated with CGA and trying to work through, develop a blueprint, take it to Albany. And, you know, as challenging as this COVID period has been and the fact that we had to reformat the forum, I think there have been some really good outcomes here. I think the fact that we have engaged the Northern Forest Center and really are in a position now to think about at the community level, at the individual level even, what can we do to make a difference? Some days it's sort of human nature to recognize that it's much easier for us to point to Albany or someone else and say, this is what you should do differently to make our lives better. And so I think that CGA has done something really powerful here if we can actually make it work, because we've witnessed now for over a decade that the devil's in the details. And sometimes it's harder to walk the walk than it is to talk the talk. So I'm really encouraged about the change in the forum, the engagement, the local responsibility, the local organizational responsibilities, the community responsibilities. But I think the other thing that really made a big difference, and I'm not going to read through this list for you, you've all got it in front of you, and one of the values of Zoom is you can see it much more effectively, read it, you're not in the back of the room. But I think because we broke out by regions, it forced us within those breakout groups to look at our communities in comprehensive ways. And so when you think about the quality of your community, it's all rolled in there together. And so there really is a role for all of us in how we do some of these things to really make a difference. Willie and I, in a lot of ways, have the easy job. We get to construct the list that says to Albany, this is what we need from you. And then we go down there and advocate for it as if we could come back to the Adirondacks and do whatever we wanted, and things would get done and just happen. And it's not our local responsibility to act better, do better, etc. And I think when Willie went through the history, we see that just isn't the case. CGA and the Adirondacks do better when we stand together. We do better the more of the details we can work out. We do better and are taken more seriously when our own platform, when we put our own house in order, when we're doing the things to partner with the state at the local level. So I want to touch on a couple of things that I think we really need to focus on in the blueprint in terms of talking to Albany, because we need their help and the local help. You know, we are hearing and seeing the challenges around housing affordability workforce housing, workforce rental stock. All of these things are becoming a profound issue for people to come here and work here and live here, get started here, get their feet on the ground. We need to look at this at the community level, at the county level. I'm part of a couple of regional efforts to look at this issue. We need to figure out how to put the message together that engages Albany, that engages funding streams like the Northern Border Commission. We've got an application in. Albany's got housing money. There's federal housing money. We need to do the studies. We need to develop the systems to move that along. You know, one of the things that has come up over and over through COVID is just some of the challenges around our school systems. But the other thing is, I think we're really hearing a change in attitude about the strength of our small rural schools. So I think while there's challenges and while there are things we need to work on around childcare and school systems, we've got an opportunity to do some things here that really could be transformational for our communities. I think our small rural schools, the smaller classroom sizes, we're going to have an easier time doing the conversions to COVID. It's going to open up additional distant learning opportunities, additional capacity school to school to partner and provide classes, provide broader curriculum within the schools. I think it's one of the things that we come out of COVID doing better, but obviously some of that is dependent on a couple of the items that you've seen in our talking points in the past, broadband and cellular. We still aren't there yet. We still have broadband gaps that COVID brought home to roost. The cellular gaps are still profound. They make a real difference. They create real challenges for us as communities. We came out of last year's forum with this in the blueprint with a recommendation around the task force. The task force was named. We still haven't seen the report. So things are moving slow, but the more we can do to get our act together to help figure out these problems, to do the local mapping, to do the to come together on the issues and figure out the solutions and take them to Albany, the better we will do. I want to just, wrap up talking a little bit about the piece of how welcoming we are and the cultural consciousness, because that's both a local issue and it certainly is something that we've been assisted in through through funding for the diversity initiative. We're very fortunate to have that funding. We obviously need to raise our cultural consciousness within the communities, but I think we need to raise our consciousness overall, because how we deal with each other, whether it's issues of poverty and the disparity that exists between classes around money, or whether it's the issues around race, or whether it's the issues around differences of opinion or bullying, our communities can do better, and we will do better by doing that and engaging Albany and working with Albany to get the funding and resources we need. And I think there's opportunities for federal funding here. Hopefully you'll all be satisfied when you see the blueprint that we've heard you, and we're preparing to take the right priorities to Washington and Albany. Thank you.
Terrific. Wow, that was great. Thank you so much, Bill and Willie. And we want to thank, in particular, the other folks involved with drafting and finalizing the blueprint. We really can't wait to see it. And we want to pledge to everybody on this call that we'll be sharing it with all of you very soon. Thank you. Zoe.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Willie and Bill, for your work in putting that together and distilling all of that down from last week. It's challenging virtually because you can't walk around the room and hear what other people are talking about. You can pop in and out of breakout rooms, but it's just not the same. So really, thank you so much. It's a great job that you did. So we're putting up this, what Doug calls a heat map, which is where all the participants came from for the forum. Again, we had over 200 people join us from 56 different communities, 5 different states. And really, we want to thank everyone who keeps coming back year after year, and all the new folks who joined us. You're really making a great contribution to the future of the park. So a couple of ways that you can continue to be involved before we finalize things here is, we have a great new website. I think everyone's been to it because that's how you join these sessions. And thank you to Doug and Great Range for putting that together. So it's commonground80k.org. That will be the resource for you moving forward in terms of seeing the past blueprints and the new blueprint. We will be putting out some monthly email communication to folks. We really can't stress enough that we hope you will continue to be engaged with the Northern Forest Center and the work that they're doing as well to attract new residents to the Adirondacks. Did I miss anything, Callie?
I think that's it. And if you have ideas, if you want to get more involved, reach out, let us know, keep in touch with us, stay tuned, let us know how things are going in your community.
Great. So we're going to wrap things up. It's almost 3 o'clock. We invited Judy Drabicki to share some closing remarks with us. She's Executive Deputy Commissioner for New York State DEC and a great friend to the Adirondacks. And we're really thrilled, Judy, that you could join us and provide us with some final remarks as we close out this year's forum.
Well, thank you, Zoe. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Oh, good. I always worry about that. Yeah, as Zoe said, I'm Judy Drabicki. It is unfortunate that Basil couldn't be here, the commissioner. I know he participated last week in the forum. He is on a well-deserved vacation with his family in a remote, undisclosed location. I do want to thank the core team. I know how hard it is to put together an event like this, and you switched from having to find food and a place to have it and breakout rooms to all the technology involved in it. So I know it was particularly challenging this year, and I think Doug's group did an excellent job from what I'm seeing now. I am very sorry I missed the forum last week. I was on a well-deserved vacation last week with my family. I was in Cranberry Lake. I'll share it with it, and it's a beautiful place. If you haven't been there, I hope most people have. I have to give a shout out to Bob Stegeman. We miss you here at DEC. Glad you're still participating in the Common Ground. I think it's critical to maintain that and to maintain all the good things that you bring to that. I have only missed a couple of the forums since 2007, which is the year I came back to DEC. And it is amazing to see, just in this recap and hearing about what happened this year, how relevant and productive and constructive the forum has remained and actually improved every year. It's just really impressive, and it goes to the core group and all of the people that are participating and have attended all these events. So thank you for that, and you deserve a hand to yourself, all, in this case, 200 and some of you. So thank you for that. It is gratifying to see the partnership with the Northern Forest Center. I think this is wonderful. I think it's Rob Riley and his staff are just great to work with, and that's evidenced by what you guys did here this year. We can't wait to see the blueprints, but also the Northern Forest Strategy Report on attracting a new generation of residents to the park. That's very exciting, and it's something we should all be very interested in pursuing and following. And I know that a lot of DEC people will be involved and will continue to be. DEC is, the state of New York is a huge supporter of the Adirondack Diversity Initiative. And as Bill referenced, we're glad to see money for that in the EPF this year. I think it's really critically important. And we're very gratified to learn about the plenary session featuring Nikki Hilton Patterson, welcoming minority individuals to the park, raising cultural consciousness, and the discussions that follow, not only in the Adirondacks, but across the state. But what a great model you're setting here. This entity should be a model across the state and across the country for how people can come together to listen to each other and learn from each other, but to elevate your voices, as Bill said, to Albany, but also to each other for better understanding within the Adirondacks and among different communities of people. So thank you all very, very much for participating. I know if the commissioner could be on, he would be, although he's probably enjoying the sun right now, wherever he is. So thank you for this opportunity, and I really look forward to being here next year. However it is handled, either whether it's remotely as this way, or hopefully we can get together again. So thanks a lot.
Great. Judy, thank you so much for joining us. And Callie, if you want to join me in signing off, saying goodbye to folks.
Great. Again, thank you. We're so grateful for everyone, and enjoy summer and stay in touch. Zoe, this has been really fun to work with you.
You too.
For the many people behind the scenes who were so vital to this, who haven't gotten their faces shown, we thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks, yes. Judy.
Sure.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.